Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're doing something a little different. We are completely leaving the modern world behind and gathering around an emerald-white neon campfire in the cinematic desert for a hakeya, a traditional nomadic tale. We're going to explore a really fascinating alternative historical perspective on a figure you probably thought you already knew. But we're going to look at him through a much older, fundamentally different lens based on our source material.
Okay, let's dive right into this by asking a pretty fascinating question. Have you ever stopped to wonder if the words you casually use at home are actually echoes of a language spoken over 2,000 years ago? It's wild to think about, right? But language is actually our very first clue to uncovering the real historical context of our subject today.
Section 1. The Neon Desert Campfire.
To really grasp what our sources are saying here, we have to completely bypass all that complex, rigid urban theology. We need to view history through the eyes of a desert wanderer, breathing that dry air and looking up at a vast open sky. It was a fluid, highly experiential, nomadic reality, shared among ancient Arab tribes like the Nabateans and Kedrites. We're talking about a world of pure asceticism and true wilderness survival. Wisdom wasn't locked away in marble temples. It was traded under the open sky by broad-shouldered men who had a direct, totally uncomplicated connection to the divine.
Section 2. Echoes of the Original Tongue.
When we dig into everyday terms, it's actually amazing. We see that the Aramaic of Jesus and ancient Arabic were, practically speaking, intertwined dialects. Words for mother and father, the severe heat of the desert, or even just the rolling pin used to make daily bread, they're virtually identical. Our sources suggest he was speaking what we could call the first Arabism, a language acting essentially as a sister to the Bedouin dialects of the desert.
Now, this gets incredibly interesting when we strip away the later Greek translations. Take the literal Greek phrase, huios tou theou, or Son of God. The literal Aramaic for that would be Bar Allaha. But historical and linguistic analysis reveals he didn't actually walk around using that as some literal Greek-style title. Instead, our sources note he used the word Abba, and he used it to denote this beautiful, spiritual closeness, a deep devotion and reliance on the Creator, very much like how desert tribes referred to anyone who was sustained by God.
And get this, the texts indicate his absolutely preferred title for himself was Bar Anasha. In Aramaic, that literally translates to Son of Man, or simply human being. Our sources argue that culturally this heavily emphasized his humanity, his profound humility, and his role as a messenger and visionary. He was deliberately stepping away from any claims of being a literal divine offspring.
Section 3. The Sovereign Creed.
Okay, so the real theological core of all this, it's sitting right there in John 17:3. Our historical sources highlight this as a massively defining statement. It functions exactly as a shahadatan, the ultimate dual testimony. Through this historical lens, he is explicitly identifying the Creator, Allah, as the only true God, and identifying himself simply as a messenger who was sent. It's really that direct.
And our sources make a point to highlight that this exact sovereign creed represents the foundational keys to paradise. It aligns perfectly with the absolute oneness of the Creator. We're talking about a pure monotheism that leaves absolutely zero room for associating partners with God. It perfectly matches that pristine, uncomplicated faith of the desert.
Section 4. The Prostrating Servant.
Belief out in the desert isn't just some abstract idea floating around in your head. It is a powerful, deeply physical action. Matthew 26:39 provides this striking visual. Imagine our broad-shouldered protagonist facing immense hardship, going out into the rough terrain, and literally bowing with his face pressed to the dirt. According to our sources, this physical act firmly establishes him, not as a deity demanding worship, but as a devoted, humble servant actively worshiping Allah.
And there's actually a very specific name for what he was doing in these desert traditions. He was performing sajda. This isn't just a casual, polite bow. It is a profound, physical manifestation of absolute humility. Placing your forehead, literally the highest part of your body, onto the lowest ground is the ultimate hallmark of sincere worship. It's a practice that's still incredibly alive and central to the faith today. This physical posture perfectly backs up his identity as a servant. In John 20:17, he explicitly mentions returning to my God and your God. Through this lens, he directed his worship entirely to his Lord and Creator, seeking absolutely zero glory for himself. His physical actions perfectly mirrored his spoken words.
Section 5. The Religion of Submission.
So what happens when you put these pieces together? When you combine the Shahadatan, that testimony of one God and his messenger, with the sajda, the physical act of placing your face on the ground, well, according to this framework, you get Islam. Our sources make it abundantly clear that this isn't just some modern religious label. By its literal definition, Islam means absolute, unconditional surrender and submission to the will of God. And this is presented as the pristine, original religion he actually practiced.
The thing is, he wasn't inventing something out of thin air. He was actively reviving the Hanifiyya. This is the pure, upright creed of Abraham. It's described in the texts as an ancient, primordial monotheism that existed long, long before more complex, urban religious institutions started categorizing and boxing up faith.
His entire existence out in that wilderness was literally a masterclass in these exact hallmarks of true worship. It meant the absolute submission of the heart, paired directly with the physical manifestation of humility. It required complete, unwavering obedience to divine commands and a steadfast refusal to associate any partners with God. That was the pure nomadic reality of his faith, as outlined in our texts.
Section 6. A return to the source.
So, as the neon fractal sparks of our campfire, our Shabbat al-Nar, rise up into the starry sky, it's time to bring all these incredible historical and linguistic threads together. By actually listening to the original Aramaic echoes and looking closely at his physical acts of worship, these sources invite us to entirely bypass centuries of later theological developments. They ask us to consider a pure, experiential desert faith centered completely on the Creator.
I'm going to leave you with one final, provocative thought to chew on as you reflect on the historical roots of his message. If the raw, uncompromising nomadic desert preserved this primal creed of submission, his Shahadatan and his Sajda, what else has the complex, institutional urban lens completely obscured from our view? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking those big questions and keep looking for the source.